Okay. I just thought since a lot of the stuff I've been looking at online is, I'm trying not to be impolite, but people, as the things they are, evolved to survive in the linear time in which they are born, and torn between somatic and germline demands, and living as Homo economicus in a fiat economy that's a non-transparent pile of bullshit. The debate is about what is, not about what it is, how it is, or why it is. So I figured I would do a little sloppy fifth grade, no, 5-year-old level infographic about computational architecture in the most basic two-dimensional sense of the natural structures of reality, and how social, resource, and control pressures all make an organic whole out of a thing we put a name to in words. And it's made a tribal discord yelling match of what is money, and what's the right money, and how do we make money, and what's the way to make money without doing anything bad, wrong, or evil. So this is not about what is, this is just purely theoretical. And it's a lot easier for me to do this than to play ping pong with people. So, structurally, in a pure theoretical sense, and we must always remember, after a person's as such effort in nature was valued in a community, we have an idea of capitalism brought to us after it existed in name by Smith and the Invisible Hand. I have a lovely joke about the economics grad student who managed to pay her way through her degree by taking advantage of the invisible hand job. But that's a whole other matter. In blue, taxation, red, resources, black lines representing barriers. In architecture, and pricing and value in the same color on this side. Now, capitalism based on the idea that an individual, and then in a family, and then in a community, because that's really how value is organized naturally, decide first what they're going to do. I mean, obviously there's pressures about what's possible to do in your architecture, but they still have the choice. And then outside of their sphere, as the process propagates, their resources go through fuzzy fields of regulation between clean barriers of county or parish, state, and federal authority. But the regulation in between is in theory not even there. So to keep things in control in a modern complex economy, it's there because of the way politics and money interact. And on the sides, you see the resources distribute out across as they go up, because the pump works in such a way that taxation and resources, pricing and value, are resolved organically in the fuzzy place between the regulated lines. They're natural lines of community organization. So if everything's working right, I just realized now this does look a little bit like a planetary circuit from suspicious observers or some of the space weathermen, but that's not a coincidence, but it's also not intentional. So you have a distributed use case market evolution, meaning pricing and value is as needed, so evolves, and it tends to distribute naturally, making a market. There's a natural progression of spheres of authority and regulation, meaning we organize first before society, and me, my mate, the in-group us, and then we have, artificial, county, state, federal. So, in theory, the unit starting in the middle, if everything works, goes up because it's generative. Pricing and value are natural, and when complex economies, as all things that are evolved complexly, or with complexity rather, they generate, they grow. So, it's generative, but it's also assortative, meaning if we don't stay on top of these fuzzy places in between that tend to be gamed by personal desires to do this thing right here, which is why the media is such a pile of garbage, that's what happens. So regulation's necessary, this religious commitment to some free marketplace where no one has to do anything but what they do and everyone's happy. Well, And everyone's even got a fair shot in a complex, globalized economy. That's nonsense. But it still is generative, and so it's really the place to start because it's based on natural structures. And you get this thing here, which a lot of people like to associate with Jesus and the Bible. And in that architecture, not a problem, because it's adversarial to the state, demanding control over everything, taxation included. So these regulatory lines that are not fuzzy fields but are hard-drawn lines, starting in the middle around central control, and this gauge asymmetric distribution of resources and pricing distributed on a horizontal line is resolved within the sphere of regulation, meaning taxation must take up all the resources. And so in this environment, without the right permeability to create complexity, like biology dictates, and to generate, what you get is, history does bear this out when it's a state-directed thing. You get central control and pricing internally fixed. That's not complex. That's people computing the economy to control it. So you get these lines here of median valuation artificially fixed, forcing price out to where the regulations meet, and then the same thing with value. But the value is not a generative circuit, it's a pump. Hence the neoliberal value pump I reference. And I messed up down here, but here you'll see the taxation lines push out, meaning we got to get in the middle and tax to the limits of regulation on both sides, but it's a distributive horizontal leak at the equator, and you get Venezuela. Well, actually, you do get Europe, but it just took 50 years for that to happen. Now, the takeaway, if you want to instantiate this in an economy and actually have a discussion about how it should be run, is you start here, and when this happens, you get a thing I call assortative redistribution, which means you're not allowed, meaning Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg, Google, you're not allowed to get that big. And rather than hitting you in the pocket, we hit you in the portfolio, meaning we don't want any more of your cash or resources than we need to keep the pump going that generates, to keep the circuit going that generates. What we want is the right to point a finger and say, you must reinvest some of this here, physically, meaning this part of the country, here in a sector of the economy that requires some of your attention because you're taking resources away from another by growing so big. There's no name for this. It hasn't been replicated by names and faces that have authority. So starting a conversation about something new is always the hardest thing, as Eric Weinstein's having a go at now. So this is my, daycare center 5-year-old infographic on why people are arguing about the economy. Because computationally, they're an inversion. One's natural, but leads to one end. One's corrective and always leads to another. So a complex interaction of both at every level is what's needed. And getting anyone to have that conversation seems to be impossible. And that's what I got here today. Thanks.